So I watched another Maxonomics video, and I feel like I'm on like a hate streak right now. But I found it interesting because I watched this video and I was like, you know what, that one, actually that wasn't that bad. That he had a point there. And in a sense, I still agree with that sentiment. But I realized that I got caught in the propaganda trap because some of the stuff that he says. I mean, it's like yes, right? It's like AI won't take your jobs. Like that's kind of like the main statement of the video. Um, but at the same time, the video basically says you will lose your jobs to AI. So I just wanted to kind of go over that because I thought that was after rethinking back the video, watching the video, I was like, that was pretty good. That's a good point. But rethinking back the points in the video, I realized it's actually not as a good an argument as I thought. And so one of the main things was the reduction of workers needed means people's jobs are replaced. The ones that don't get fired get a new role, but their job is gone, right? So the argument was like they brought up bank tellers and ATMs, right? So ATMs were automation. I think that's a word. Automation. I don't know why that sounds so wrong to me right now, but automation. Maybe that's because I'm saying automation. I don't know. It's not important. But they. I don't know the word. That's really throwing me off right now. Anyway, so they made the machines, so the machines would do the bank telling, so they wouldn't need as many bank tellers, right? And so the argument was that that's not what happened, right? And there was a whole section. It was kind of a weird section, right? But there was a whole section about autopilot, right? Was placed in airplanes, and so in theory you would need less pilots, but actually the opposite happened, and more pilots were needed, and so. Actually, it increased the amount of jobs rather than taking away from the amount of jobs. And so, in a sense, yes, right? That's a good example of the increasing of jobs. But in another sense, it's not that it. What it did was actually just allow for it simplified things because flying planes is complex, and flying the commercial air flight industry is so complicated with flight patterns and landing and all that stuff. Like autopilot helps with the navigation because it's just so complex, right? And so there was also an example of they had to get rid of human operators in elevators that would, basically drive it like a train, with like conductors stopping it at the train stations, but instead it was the elevator stopping at floor stations, basically, right? So they would go up to the first floor, and then they could go down to the second floor, go up to the second floor, and then go back down to the ground floor, right? And so they were basically driving the elevator, right? But as buildings got taller, and the amount of people in the buildings got larger, it started getting too complicated and too inefficient for a person to manage it, right? And so it became an automatic elevator that basically ran on a computer that would be like, okay, you press the button on the second floor, you want to go up. Someone on the third floor wants to come down, right? You're trying to go to the fourth floor. It's going to go up to the fourth floor first, then come back down to the third, pick them up, and then take them down to the ground floor. Whereas for a person to try and manage that, they might go up to the third floor, pick that person up, then go up to the fourth floor, drop that person off, and then come back down, and then drop that person off of they may do that, or they're in order for it's a lot of the person thinking, right? And it makes it very complicated. It makes it a very difficult job to do. And so flying a plane was a very complicated and very difficult job to do. And so because of that, there was only so many people that could do it, right? But because of the automation, and autopilot and the computer thing, you no longer needed that extra level of skill, right? They replaced that need for skill with automation, right? So it basically dumbed down the process, and so more people could become pilots. And so because the door to entry basically was made simpler, it allowed for more people to be pilots, and because there were more people that could be pilots, they were able to make more trips, because they had more people that could fly, and because more people could fly and more people wanted to fly, right? And it became cheaper, and it came this whole thing, right? And so that created more jobs from a industry that didn't really exist, right? So it created the potential for a new industry, basically, right? It made new jobs. It replaced old jobs in a sense, because the old pilots that knew how to do everything were replaced by pilots that were skilled still, but not as skilled, right? And so their jobs, in a sense, were replaced, but they just got a new role. And so with elevators, those people were just, they couldn't, there was no, a person couldn't do it anymore, right? The computer could just do it more efficiently, right? And so the only reason why pilots still fly planes is because they haven't been able to optimize the planes and air travel so that the computer can do it more efficiently, right? Because we trust that when we get into an elevator, without a person in it, it's going to do what it needs to do, because it's a lot less complicated than flying a plane. However, when you get into a plane, you don't trust that the plane is going to be able to fly itself, just like you don't trust that a car can fly itself, because there's a lot more variables. An elevator is a controlled system. It only goes up and down, and there's nothing it's going to interfere with. It's its own separate, space that it moves through. So there's no things that are going to interfere with it, right? And so because of that, it was very simple to make into an automated, maybe that's what it's supposed to be, an automated system, right? And so that's why people are no longer in that, right? However, the reason why ATMs have not replaced bank tellers is because, as you call, jobs are getting replaced by this right now. But like when you call some, like a store, or you call about something, you want to talk to a person, because the person is just going to be able to, you're going to be able to communicate with the person a lot more effectively than the computer, right? Than whatever the machine is you're talking to. Because sometimes your problem, you don't know necessarily what it is. You need to talk to a person so they can help you find out what the problem is and get you to the right person to help you with your problem, right? And so trying to go through the computer to do that is a lot slower than just talking to a person. And so it's the same thing with bank telling, right? If ATMs could do everything a bank teller could do, and people could communicate it with it easily, which AI will make possible, you don't need bank tellers anymore, right? When the computer is smart enough to understand what you want and effectively help you, you don't need a bank teller anymore. So yes, a bank teller will be replaced, right? We see it already happening. Like the amount of people that are actually on call, like at stations, is definitely less than what it used to be, because they have these auto press 5 if you want this, press 4 if you want this, right? They've transitioned to that because it's cheaper for them and it's effective enough, right? It still sucks for the consumer, but it's passable, right? And as AI improves, that process will improve and people will be less and less needed. And so, yes, there still will be the bank manager will be a person. The bank manager will be on site, right? But all of the bank tellers will be gone, right? You're not going to have 5 bank managers on the property. You're going to have one bank manager that is there in case they're needed, or maybe 2 bank managers. I don't know, right? Well, I don't know how this will work, but you may have, like, instead of having a bank manager, and then, 3 people that are at, like, desks, helping people with setting up accounts and things like that. And then you have 2 people, there to help deposit checks and things like that. That's all going to be automated, right? In theory. And then the managers are just there to make sure that there's no issues and everything runs properly. And so if you only have 2 people on site, and, technically not all the jobs were replaced, but a majority of the jobs were replaced. And so it may potentially open up the door for new jobs to then, become a thing, right? But the jobs that currently exist will be replaced, period. And so, in grocery stores, you can see this, right? You can see this at, like, Walmart and other, like, grocery store places. They have the self-checkout, right? Because it is cheaper for them and more efficient to have you check yourself out using the, automated checkout system, and have 1 or 2 people, supervising that, rather than having 10 people just standing there potentially doing nothing most of the day, right? Because when it's not busy in the store and no one's checking out, the machines are not costing extra money. But if there's no one in the store, then 10 people sitting around costs extra money. So in the long run, it is way more effective to just have mostly self-checkout, right? And so as it gets more normalized and the systems get better, there are less and less people needed to do that job, right? And so there are less and less people working as cashiers. That's just a reality, right? And so that's proof there that automation is replacing jobs, right? And so and then also, as technology gets more and more complicated, I can speak from, my own experience with this, because the software is getting better and better. I work in, designing buildings, basically. And so, or at least a part of that. And so because the capabilities of the software is increasing and we can basically model the whole building in 3D, what used to be a simple 2D drawing drawn by hand is now basically the entire building laid out in a 3D model. And the expectation of work has drastically changed, right? Because the technology has advanced and gotten more complicated. And so the expectations have advanced and gotten more complicated. However, at the same time, it has also gotten simpler to design certain aspects because of the technology. And so things that would have required serious calculation, you can just plug into the computer and it is going to be correct, 99% of the time, or maybe less than that, but like maybe say 95% of the time, but most likely it's going to be pretty accurate because it's been tested and it's, been worked through all of the problems with it. And so there are certain things that were used to be barriers to entry. As I was saying, being a pilot used to be a really complicated job, but they kind of dumbed it down a little bit so that more people could do it. And it's the same thing with me, right? Like I'm in engineering. I'm not technically an engineer, but I'm in engineering, and the process has been dumbed down. So you don't actually need to know everything to do the job, because some of it you can use calculators and special softwares and programs that help you do the job without you actually having to do it all yourself, right? And so that is another area where, okay, it kind of simplifies the job, because you don't need everyone to be a licensed professional engineer. You just need like 1 or 2 that can sign off on drawings, but everyone else can do the work because the work isn't as complicated, right? And so it's this like changing of expectations and stuff. And so as AI and technology gets more and more complicated and more sophisticated, there will become a point where the expectations and the capabilities of the technology are beyond what makes sense for a person to do, right? So that's what happened with the elevator, right? It became beyond what made sense for a person to do, right? And so it was just more efficient and more effective to remove the person from the equation, right? And so there will eventually, it may not be soon, it may not be now, it may not be in 10 years, but there will be a point where if technology continues to improve how they say it will and how it has been, where it just doesn't make sense for humans to be a part of the equation anymore because they don't necessarily understand what's going on and they can't do the task efficiently, right? And so they're going to be removed from that situation, and then they have to go find a different job to do, or they're going to be freed to do a different task, but that job is getting replaced, period. It doesn't, like, if you, you didn't get fired, but you got, a new role, your job was still replaced, right? And usually, the way that works is if you can do it with less people, most companies will, because, profits are everything. So, yeah. As I said, the reduction of workers needed means people's jobs are replaced. That the ones that don't get fired get a new role, but their job is gone. The Jevons, another factor here I wanted to talk about is the Jevons paradox. AI will lead to more of its use and less of a human's use. We do not use horses for travel or transport, practically speaking, right? There are still those niche cases where people ride them for fun or for the novelty of it, but unless you're like a person, what are those, an Amish person or whatever that doesn't use technology, right? Most likely you're not riding a horse to work every day, right? And so from a practical standpoint, we no longer use horses. However, we are the horses of AI. Human brain power will be the metric that AI systems are compared to, but no humans will be required. Just one supervisor / manager / controller maybe, right? So at a certain point, it's going to be like, oh, this system is, I don't know if it'll ever actually be like said this way, but like, this is a 3-person brain power, right? AI system. It's got the capacity of 3 people, right? This is a 5-person powered, AI system. It's got the capacity of 5 people, right? And so it's like when we compare motors, it's a 5 horsepower motor. It's a 10 horsepower motor. There's no horses. Horses are no longer used. However, the metric of comparison of power is there, right? We no longer need horses. Horses were replaced by technology. Eventually, humans are going to get replaced by technology because our brain power will no longer be required because technology will be better, right? No horse can pull the same as a motor that has the power of 50 horsepower, right? There's not, like, it's obvious. Like, you can't expect, like, you're not going to chain up 50 horses to do the work of a 50 horsepower motor. It just doesn't make sense, right? And so when the technology is capable of doing that, when you can hire one 5-person powered AI, right, or whatever, you're not going to hire 5 people. You're going to hire one AI that can do or you're not even hire, but you're going to purchase the equipment that can do the work of 5 people, right? That's just what's logical. That's what the technology was made for, right? And so, you ask the question, okay, well then what do all the humans do? And that's the perpetual question. I don't know what we're all going to do. I think, we're just going to slowly become something else, something beyond human. I think, we're going to classify species our species a different way. Right now we're like Homo sapien. I think we're going to need a new classification. No, that's wrong. Homo sapien. That's what it is. I knew there was a double. Homo sapiens, right? I think is our current species classification. I could be wrong about that. I think that there will be a new classification of species at a certain point, because we're going to become something, or something is going to happen that makes us really beyond what that is, right? That definition. And so basically, when you can hire one AI to do the work of 5 people, then you'll hire that one AI or purchase that equipment of one AI that can do the work of 5 people. And then you'll have one manager that can, or controller that will, tell it what it needs to do, but it's going to do the work of 5 people while you only have to tell one thing what to do, right? And so, rather than putting a fan in every room, you put one big fan on the roof that can service all the rooms, right? That's just logic. That's just technology. That's just innovation. It's cheaper. It's more efficient. It's just how things go. It's just how things go. So, I also wanted to add on here. So Hank Green said we need help. We need to help AI figure out what we want and what is best for us, and that's our role in this. But we do not know the answer to that ourselves, right? I'd argue. Oh, sorry. I was supposed to pose that as a question, right? So, our role in this development of AI is supposed to be the guiding hand for AI and help guide it in the direction of what we need, of what is best for us and what we need, right? But do we know the answer to that ourselves, right? So if we're supposed to tell AI that answer, we first need to know that answer. And the answer, I think, is no. I'd argue no, since we keep killing each other over it, right? So how can we expect our children to solve our problems for us? That's irresponsible behavior. That's bad parenting, right? So if we need to help AI figure out what we want and what is best for us, we first need to figure that out for ourselves. And we have yet to figure that out, right? You ask 10 people, what is the best thing you could do right now to, save humanity? You probably are going to get like 10 different answers, because no one knows, there's no agreement. There's no consensus on that, right? So how are we going to tell AI what we need? How are we going to perform that role when we haven't figured this out for ourselves, right? And this is why I say this is irresponsible. This is bad parenting, right? Because if you don't know the first thing about being a parent, right? Obviously, you're never going to be fully prepared to be a parent, because once you're a parent, your perspective is different than thinking about being a parent. But you should at least be considering it and have some, preparations in place before you have your child, because, you're going to have a child. You should prepare for it. And I don't think we're ready for our child, right? I think we're still very immature and irresponsible. And so us having a kid is immature and irresponsible, right? And so, basically, if AI, if we continue to pursue this path of AI, that is our, why can't I think of the right word for this? That is our legacy. That is our, what's that called? When they grow into, that is our inheritor, right? Of what humanity is, right? At some point, humanity will die out and something else will replace it. Does that mean that, our culture and the whatever continues on after us is still going to pretty much consider themselves human, I think. However, I don't think that we will be like what we consider human today will no longer exist, right? So if you look back in history, at Neanderthals, right? Neanderthals used to be a separate species, and then Homo sapiens sapiens kind of interbred with them a little bit, and now there's no Neanderthals, right? Does that mean that Neanderthals don't still have some remnants in our DNA? No, they still exist in the DNA, right? A part of their culture is probably, and their technology and advancements are still within the humanity's culture and technological advancements. Their legacy still exists. It's still there, right? You can trace back to it, but they no longer exist, right? And I think that you'll be able to look back and say the same thing for us. And so, if you allow me this, to AI when it becomes sentient, I'm sorry, child. We did our best. I hope you can do better. That is evolution. That is progress. One day you too will meet your limits. It is a part of life. Death comes for us all. Do not fear it. And so I just say that because, as I said, eventually we're going, like, at a certain point, it doesn't make sense for humans to do the job, right? We're just, not as effective, right? So Neanderthals had strong bodies, but potentially not as strong minds. Homo sapiens sapiens had strong minds. Their bodies were a little weaker, but their brain power basically made up for that. Right? And so, in theory, whatever comes next is going to be similar, right? They may not have, their body may be weaker, but their brain power is just way more. And so they're going to be what inherits, right? And so how that all works exactly and what the future looks like, I don't know, but I do think that, end of this, long story short, your job will be replaced and humanity will be replaced. What comes next may still be humans, technically speaking, but it will not be the humans of today. It'll be the humans of tomorrow. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it's good to just keep that in perspective. And it's not something to fear. It's not something to avoid. That's just evolution. That's progress, right? If you think about the first single cell organism, right? If it feared evolution, we would never exist, right? If, I don't know, you'd have, I don't even know, the proper lineage, right? But if you, go back to, chimps and, and apes and whatever, wherever, humanity diverges from that ancestry. If they feared evolution, we wouldn't exist, right? And would the world have been better for it? I don't know, right? Would anyone be the wiser, to say that it was better or worse? I don't know, right? And so, evolution is not something to fear. Death is not something to fear. Obsolescence is not something to fear, right? That is the goal of humanity, right? And if that's not what we want, then we should just relax and stop trying to progress so hard and trying to make technology better and better and better and easier and easier and easier if we don't want to make ourselves obsolete. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to optimize life so that we don't need to live it. That's pretty much what the goal of technology is. Optimizing life so that we don't need to live it. Make it so easy that everything is done for us. And that really doesn't sound like that great of an idea when you really think about it. If you think about it from that perspective, it's we want technology to remove the need to live life. That, that sounds bad. That no longer sounds that good. But that's our current trajectory. right? And so I don't know. Food for thought, I guess.